What's up, YouTubers? So we're going to try something a little bit different in this video, the second video in my Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars Explained video, because in the last video I was really just kind of giving a blow-by-blow, but I figured that might not be a whole lot of fun for anyone listening to it, so we're going to try something a little bit different. I'm really just going to kind of talk about what's going on, over the next 4 issues. We're going to be covering issues 5 through 8 of Marvel Superheroes Secret Wars. So, just kind of bear with me a little bit. I'm kind of going a little off the cuff here. I'm just going to really talk about the things that leapt out. Before we dig in, I post new videos every week. Make sure to click subscribe so you can become one of Earth's mightiest subscribers, and also tap that bell button so you make sure you don't miss anything. Okay, so when we last left off, we realized Galactus had summoned something, and it had the heroes completely caught off guard. Turns out what that was Galactus's world ship, which is this massive, just crazy shaped spaceship that is essentially its own planet. Like, it has like an ecosystem and trees and mountains and water and oceans and all other stuff. I mean, it's a very interesting ship. Now, granted, the artwork by, I believe it's Bob Layton, doesn't really convey as much of it as I would like, because it's kind of vague. You're pretty much going on the heroes. You're kind of going off their word here, but it was kind of the limitations of the artwork at the time. But I mean, this thing is massive, and I think the reason why it's so crazily shaped is because it has to be able to house a person that is as big as Galactus. I know I left us on kind of a cliffhanger in that last video. That's pretty much all that happens here. In issue 5, as far as that particular part goes. The reveal is actually really quick. What we get next, though, is, and one of the other things that's kind of interest, we kind of get a little bit more of a glimpse into what the shaman who leads the village that the heroes are in, what she can do. And we discover her name is Zaji. I think I'm saying that right. Probably not, but you know what? We're just going to go with it. And we discover that she has the ability to heal people, and it does take a lot out of her. It's really kind of funny because these powers are going to come into play for the rest of the series. The other thing that kind of pops up, and this isn't really like the biggest thing in the world, but in the previous video I talked about how the Wrecking Crew and Doc Ock and everybody started riding Molecule Man's nutsack when he pretty much single-handedly defeated the Avengers and the Fantastic Four. And that's no small feat, what he did, dropping a mountain on them. But you notice they go right back to picking at him. And Molecule Man displays even more of his power, which also kind of reiterates the fact that he can only control inorganic matter. He's actually able to control inorganic matter so far as to take one of the Wrecking Crew's costumes and turn it into the hardest metal that he can imagine, and renders that character completely incapable of moving. That's how tough Owen Reese is. But this is really just a scene to kind of play up the fact that Molecule Man is no longer taking shit off of anybody, and he's starting to grow a backbone, and that is a scary thing for a guy who has the power set that Molecule Man has. After some hemming and hawing between the heroes, while they're back kind of hanging with Galactus and making sure he's not getting into anything, he finally strikes, though he doesn't do it directly so much as he sends out an automaton to fight the heroes, and this automaton lays waste to everybody. It's going toe-to-toe with the Hulk, it's going toe-to-toe with Captain America and the Thing and Human Torch. It is wrecking them to the point, these guys, they're literally getting bodied out there. And they do eventually take down the automaton once Human Torch gets the bright idea to see if the automaton has any internal components that could melt, which does end up bearing fruit. But even at that point, the villains show back up, Doc Ock and the Wrecking Crew, and they pretty much just kind of spoil the day. And it's so weird because you would think at this point they would be teaming up to fight the common foe, but for whatever reason they have no interest in fighting Galactus. They only have an interest in taking on the heroes. And as I mentioned earlier, this is where Colossus gets his fatal injury, where even while in his organic form. And this just speaks to the Wrecker's ability to wield that, enchanted crowbar that he has. He manages to mortally wound Colossus to the point that the X-Men leave him for dead pretty much, which just seems so uncharacteristic of the X-Men because comic books. The one thing that does happen, and I think this kind of softens the blow a little bit, is that the Avengers and Fantastic Four pick Colossus up and take them with him, and they carry him off on their ship, while everybody's trying to escape and get away from Galactus. And, Zaji does end up healing him to the point that he's renewed, and it creates a weird, kind of love triangle thing between Colossus and Zaji and Johnny Storm. It's not something that really bears fruit right away, but it's kind of weird considering that, Colossus technically has a lady waiting on him back home. But one of the things that this does is that while the fighting was going on between, Galactus, well, not even really Galactus, but between his automaton and the heroes, and Galactus was so busy trying to get his, world ship prepared to, devour Battle World, Dr. Doom took this opportunity to infiltrate the ship. And while he's on Galactus' ship, he does discover that another villain is actually lying in wait, and that is Klaw. The reason why Klaw is there is because he faced off against the mutant Dazzler, who pretty much absorbs sound, and Klaw is essentially made of sound. So when she defeats him and uses her powers on him, she pretty much absorbs Klaw and his entire essence, to the point that when she uses her powers on Galactus at a later point in a completely different story that I'm not going to go into here, that she pretty much infuses Klaw into the world ship that Galactus pilots. And it's a kind of far-fetched story, but just go with it because comic books. Now, one of the other things that does happen, and this technically happens a little later in this 4-issue run that I'm going through, but Galactus is no fool. He quickly figures out that Dr. Doom is kind of scuffling around in his ship, and he is one of those things. Dr. Doom is forever falling out of the sky in this series, but this is like the second time that Dr. Doom gets expelled from something. And he gets rocketed out of the world ship and crash lands back down to Battle World. And when he resurfaces, he just kind of walks into Doom Base, bypasses everybody, and just crashes on a nearby bed. And he's done for pretty much the rest of this video. He's not really going to pop up except for maybe one more time later in this video, and it's mostly for comedic effect, because this is Secret Wars, and fights are just going to happen for no reason, because this is pretty much the blueprint for Injustice 20 years before the fact. But there is yet another fight. The Molecule Man gets wrecked by Wolverine, and this causes a huge rift. Kind of roughly in and around the same time, the Wrecking Crew has killed the Wasp. During another encounter, the Wrecking Crew comes along. They dump the corpse of the Wasp before the heroes. It kind of sets off some of the characters, because at this point there's been a lot of hemming and hawing again about, do we go after Galactus? Do we go after Doom? What is it exactly that we're doing? No one really seems to have a plan except for Captain America, who isn't really sharing his plan, because his plan is essentially to just sit tight, wait things out, and strike when the moment is right. Though they never really say when the moment is right. And because of this indecision, She-Hulk just storms off. While all this indecision is going on, Zaji tries to revive the Wasp, but the Wasp is already too far gone, she's dead, and Zaji cannot do it. This prompts She-Hulk to just say, you know what, screw it. She's like, I can't take this anymore. I am not just going to sit by while this is going on. And this essentially leads to She-Hulk getting a major victory over the Wrecking Crew, but it's short-lived, because they come back in force and they pretty much put the hurt on She-Hulk to the point that she's out of commission for a good chunk of the rest of this story. Now, I did kind of skip over a little something. We do get introduced to a new character, and that is Spider-Woman. Now, this isn't the Spider-Woman you're probably thinking about. This isn't Jessica Drew Spider-Woman. This is Julia Carpenter Spider-Woman, who just kind of shows up out of nowhere. This is actually her first appearance. ever. She was created specifically for this story. Spider-Woman's a weird character because Marvel pretty much created Spider-Woman to keep DC Comics from creating their own Spider-Woman because of, it was a weird copyright loophole. They pretty much did this to say na boo boo to DC Comics. And that was pretty much all there was to it. And the role was pretty much vacated, I want to say, in the early 80s. And, Jessica Drew is the original Spider-Woman, and she comes back to it later. She's kind of brought back later on. But the Julia Carpenter version is the one that actually comes into play in this one, so there's that. She can pretty much do all the same stuff that Spider-Man can, but her other thing was that she could do like this whole psi web thing, which was like a web of psionic energy that could solidify, and it just, it was kind of weird. You could tell they were trying a little too hard with Julia Carpenter being Spider-Woman. The thing I find kind of problematic in this particular issue, it's not until Professor X finally telepathically connects to Captain America and says, hey, we're on your side, the X-Men are at your disposal. That's when Captain America decides that now is the time to strike, which I think is just ridiculous, but whatever. They put the hurt on the Wrecking Crew and Doc Ock pretty much. Titania does actually kind of get a little bit of an uplift from like that previous video where she actually takes on Spider-Man by herself, and she's holding her own. She's holding her own with him, but the Thing loses his powers mid-fight, and Crusher Krill just puts the hurt on him. And but it's Spider-Woman who actually takes out Crusher Krill, the Absorbing Man, and it's just kind of weird because it's like it's just a moment for Ben Grimm to get treated like trash and feel crappy about himself. Hawkeye is up against Pile Driver, and he's pretty much telling him, like, basically, you better back up because I'm going to put an arrow in you. And Pile Driver does not believe it. And then out of nowhere, he gets hit with an arrow, and he seems so surprised that he actually just passes out. But it's just stupid. And, anytime you have someone on your team, anytime you have a villain handy who has the ability to manipulate a character, like, mentally or emotionally through like some magic or telepathic ability, and the Hulk is there, just go ahead and bank on the fact that he's going to be the one that's going to fall for it. It ends up just failing as quickly as it started, and Captain America puts the Enchantress on her ass. But a lot of this fight is pretty much just for them to discover the Molecule Man and try and take him captive, which doesn't really happen. The other kind of crazy thing here too is that Doctor Doom is found by Captain America, and Captain America just looks at him. Doom is just kind of like with his head in his hands. He's not even talking. He's just sitting there. And Captain America just leaves him to his own devices. Doesn't even try to like fight him, or doesn't even try and take him into custody or anything. Just leaves him. And he's like, he's harmless. Because comic books. There's a couple of other little beats that pop up here and there in this particular issue, this final issue that I'm going to talk about in this video. When Hawkeye and Captain Marvel return to the village, they find out that the Wasp is alive and well. But at the same time, Colossus discovers that Zaji is gone, like she's dead. Basically, Colossus discovers that Wasp wasn't even really dead. She was just wounded, and she was in a stasis. So basically, once the stasis wore off, Zaji came along and healed her, but it practically sapped the entire life out of her almost. And she wasn't so much dead as she was just, exhausted. So the Wasp is back, and Mr. Fantastic is helping Iron Man repair his suit, and this is where you find out that Tony Stark is not in the Iron Man costume, because at this particular point in time, he was having a really bad bout with alcoholism, and there was a whole story arc on it. And basically, Rhodey is taking over the reins of Iron Man for Tony, for this mission. But I think it's also pretty cool, too, that, they had this moment where, Rhodey's like, hey, did you expect there to be a black man under the metal? With the true class of a man who would be called Mr. Fantastic, says, the only thing that I knew is that there was a man under there, and I didn't really put much thought into it past that. And I thought that was a really cool touch, because this comic has some issues when it comes to like diversity and gender equality and some other issues. But the thing that you've all been waiting for, though, in this particular issue, and this is where we're going to leave the video, Spider-Man finds out that Thor got his cape back, because he did lose it when he was supposedly vaporized. He gets his cape back and his helmet. Thor's like, oh yeah, there's this machine in the other room. You just go in there and you just think up whatever you want and it'll, create it for you. Pretty much like the replicators on Star Trek. Spider-Man, he uses the machine, and before him is this black ball of gooey substance. And before Spider-Man can even so much as like consider what it is, it just starts crawling all up him. And before you know it, he's got the iconic black symbiote suit. Now, we don't know at this point that it is a symbiote, but, we'll get to that. That's one of those things that they address once Secret Wars is over. We're going to go ahead and leave it there. So let me know what you all thought about this particular 4 issues of Secret Wars. And if you have any questions, hit me up with them. If you like this video, go ahead and click the like button. If you haven't already, click subscribe so you can become one of Earth's mightiest subscribers, and tap that bell button so you get notifications about any new videos that I post. Once again, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time. Deuces.